Which one of history's good guys was actually a horrible person? Not necessarily a good guy, but got lots of positive attention from the release of The Greatest Showman. Apparently P.T. Barnum was a terrible person in real life. Henry Ford was so anti-Semitic that Hitler considered him a hero. America's Dad. Bill Cosby. Alfred Hitchcock was an asshole, sexual predator. Tippi Hedren wrote about it in her memoir. She did say he was a brilliant film marker. So you can be both. Thomas Edison. Biggest monopolist ever and took credit for other people's work. He didn't invent the light bulb but bought the rights and advanced it. He monopolized the film projector plus most films at the time, and it took a very long lawsuit to get that fixed. He took many creations from his employees and put his name on it. This wasn't illegal because of the contracts employees signed at the time, but it's not exactly a sign of goodwill. I don't hate the guy, but his character is often completely exaggerated. A shorter list would be which of history's good guys were truly good guys and not later found out to be complete $dollar holes. Edit. Thank you for the award. Stranger. I don't really know what else to say. So, thank you. John Lennon. Violent wife-beater. Vicious and hateful little shitbag. He used to scream at his baby boy when he was crying because it distracted him. Wrote Imagine speaking about dreaming of no possessions. From his multi-million-dollar condo overlooking Central fucking Park in NYC. Didn't speak to George Harrison for months after he published his autobiography because it didn't praise Lennon quite enough for his taste. Absolute piece of shit. Edit 1. Hot damn. This blew up like the 4th of July at Chernobyl. Thank you all for your comments and opinions. For those who don't believe me, please do not take my word for it. Read his Wikipedia page. All of it. Check out Julian Lennon's interview about his father and how he was treated. Be safe out there everyone. And #X200B. Edit 2. On a more serious note, I want to address a specific defense that I've read a few times and that absolutely infuriates me. I don't mind that you call me names or insult me because you don't like what I wrote about John Lennon. And that's fine. But this shit right here is unacceptable. He wasn't a violent wife beater. He only slapped his first wife once and apologized for it. And #X200B. ... Are you guys fucking serious? The man physically assaulted his significant other, so. This is domestic abuse. Period. If you knew someone that was slapped by their so. What would you say? Would you actually tell this person, oh well it's not abuse. It was only a slap. And they apologized for it. What the fuck is wrong with you domestic violence apologists? Those of you who are saying that he wasn't a violent wife-beater because he only slapped her once. You are reprobates. John Lennon was a garbage human being and an unfaithful, abusive husband to all of women who were unfortunate enough to marry him. In the name of every single victim of domestic abuse, I refuse and denounce your bullshit. It was only a slap defense of this domestic abuser. In this thread, a lot of people who were never considered good guys. While he almost certainly wasn't the first to say it. Lord Acton once observed that great men are almost always bad men. Pluck any great man from history, those rare figures about whom the story of the human race seems to turn, and you find a monster who changed the world. Probably without even intending to do so. Depends on what you mean. Judging by today's standards, I'd say most historical good guys were horrible people. Judging by the standards of their era, things become more complicated. Steve Jobs was a bit of an ass. Tinkerbell. Everybody thinks she was so cute and such a good friend to Peter. But she was a jealous psychopath and tried to murder Wendy several times. Ned Kelly is neat. Because he seems to have recognized his anti-hero status. His actions were never morally right. But it's hard to say we haven't ever wanted to do the same. Jebediah Springfield. Or his real less commonly known name. Hans Sprungfeld, the murderous pirate. This is a little more niche. But Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. The guy did great things. And created a program of recovery that has saved millions of lives since its inception 85 years ago. He was also an arrogant asshole that cheated on his wife even in sobriety. Edit. This isn't here to scare away anyone that's trying to get sober. I've been sober thanks to AA for 5.5 years. So don't let this keep you away if you're struggling with your drinking. Joseph P. Kennedy, dad of John, Bobby, and Teddy, had one of his daughters lobotomized. She was likely autistic but was considered an embarrassment to the family. There's a statue of Oliver Cromwell in London. Loads of movies about him and how he was a brave revolutionary. Nah, fuck that. He was an evil sociopath who committed genocide on Irish Catholics and turned the UK into a Puritan dictatorship. Alexander Graham Bell. This man did not invent the telephone. Several people were working on similar technology at the same time. Antonio Meucci invented it first. But there was a court case over who got the patent rights. Meucci died before the case was settled. And Graham Bell won the glory he didn't deserve. Ellen. Bob Marley. And there's a very good story to back this up that also explains how he grew to be one reggae singer of Jamaica. He had a posse of friends that would intimidate radio networks of Jamaica into playing his music, as well as destroying the alpha discs of other newer artists. IDKWTF they're called, but the copy the radio networks were given in order to play on the air. He might have been trying to promote feel-good music and peace and all that, but he was a thug when it came to getting that music out. Mother Teresa. IDK man. When I read about Martin Luther last year, I thought he was kinda cool as he created the Protestant branch of Christianity. But I recently read about what he thought of Jews, and yikes. For those of you who don't know, he got pissed when the Jews didn't want to convert to his religion and started being anti-Semitic as fuck. He wrote a whole book on Jews and their lies, and said that he urged others to burn down synagogues to prove their loyalty to Christianity. He also wanted the Jewish prayer books to be taken away from them. Edit. Because of misunderstandings. I do not mean Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther was a monk during the 16th century who initially started the Reformation for Christianity, and was the founder of Protestantism. Sir John A. Macdonald, first Prime Minister of Canada, did a lot for the country in its infancy but treated Indigenous people like garbage. Most of them. I don't know about other countries. But in America, schools tend to put historical figures on high pedestals. It would be better to be upfront about how people do good things and terrible things. Alexander Graham Bell pushed for the eugenics of deaf and hard of hearing people and was a major obstacle to fund schools for the deaf, which thankfully did persist despite this asshat. Charlie Chaplin. He got married to a 15-year-old girl because he got her pregnant when she was 14. He was openly pedophile. And, from what I've read, quite an asshole. Since most have been covered, I'll do a guy who was a true fucking villain who turned into kind of a decent guy. It doesn't nearly wipe the slate clean, but it's an interesting historical transformation. Nathan Bedford Forrest. Slave trader. Confederate general. Likely war criminal. First Grand Wizard of the Klan. In later years, Forrest expressed regret at his life's work. He began publicly advocating for former slaves to receive better treatment, including their ability to enter into higher education. He attempted to act upon his shame by petitioning President Grant to allow him to put down the KKK by force. Edit. My caveat wasn't strong enough. And that might be my own clumsy wording. Forrest was undoubtedly a monster in some ways. And his legacy as one shouldn't be altered, despite his regrets. Elvis Presley. He never wrote a song in his life. But his record label made any songwriters hand over half of their writing fees before Elvis would record their songs. He's credited as a co-writer on the majority of his songs. Astronomer. Here, this is a hard one to admit because I definitely loved his book and idolized his antics a bit when I was a young physics major. But Richard Feynman. A lot of people read Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, and share my reaction. And his physics lectures are amazing. But the older I get and the more people I meet who knew him. Holy shit. The guy was beyond just. Times were different levels of misogyny against women. He committed domestic violence against his wife. Kept lying to undergrads when he was in Cornell that he wasn't a professor so he could sleep with him, and, rumor has it, had to leave Cornell for Caltech because he slept with other faculty members' wives. And I've definitely heard a ton about him trying to pick up other scientists at physics conferences to know he was considered a creep. To be clear, I think someone can do good science and be an awful person. But that's not what Op was asking. Also, anyone who has been around a physics department knows that casual sexist jokes and the like are still not that uncommon today. And the fact that physics keeps idolizing Feynman probably doesn't help in changing the culture. In some aspects to the 60s and 70s when the Beatles were icons. I'm talking about John Lennon. People who use his image and face for peace sometimes forget important details. He abused women. He was a cheater. He abused his children, made one go completely deaf in one ear. Total hypocrite on the no possessions, when he lived one of the most lavish lifestyles of his time. Compulsive liar. Had a sexual appetite for his own mother. Almost killed a few people, look up Bob Wooler. He was almost punched to death by John. There were others, but their stories have either been disputed or unclaimed. So whenever I see a bunch of people sing Imagine, I just shake my head in shame, cause so many people don't even know how bad he was but act like he was a saint. Young, Gandhi was racist. 2 random quotes from him. General belief seems to prevail in the colony that the Indians are a little better, if at all, than savages or the natives of Africa. About the mixing of the Kaffirs with the Indians. I must confess I feel most strongly. Edit. Fixed spelling and added young, as many correctly point out. He changed as he grew older and grew wiser. MLK was a preacher and a critical part of our nation's civil rights movement. He also fucked a lot of hoes while being married. Nothing is black and white. People are complicated and flawed. Winston Churchill. And #X200B. Edit. Holy cow. So many awards. Thank you all. Second edit. Over 2,000 karma. Wow. Most Australians think Captain Cook was a pretty good dude. I think the Aboriginals would say otherwise. Che Guevara. I don't think the people who wear his face on their t-shirt know he was kind of a horrible person. Man, I hate threads like this because you have a combination of 1. Try-hard 13-year-old armchair historians who hate everything and therefore stretch even the tiniest minor flaw into a war crime. Because they believe no one should ever be successful because they never will. 2. People woefully ignorant of the context of history. If we hold standards, that means 99% of the people who lived in that era are bad. Then the meaning of the word bad is useless. 3. Having a lifetime of causing mass amounts of social good aren't negated by being a dick in one instance. Edit. I'm adding another because I see it happen too often. 4. You had a professor who had a bug up their ass about a particular historical figure and spent too much class time giving you a one-sided assessment you took for granted because, hey, they're a professor and they should know. Albert Speer, the good Nazi, constructed an elaborate narrative that he didn't know about the Holocaust, concentration camps, or slavery when he was the Minister of War Production, which was intimately involved in all 3 of those things. Due to him being an extremely effective liar, he wasn't called out on his bullshit until after he died, when the historical narrative was scrutinized. Rudyard Kipling, author of The Jungle Book. Paraphrasing, the only way to keep the yellow man out is to bring the white man in. Teddy Roosevelt. Interesting quote of his. I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are the dead Indians. But I believe 9 out of every 10 are. So I learned recently that Coco Chanel of Chanel No. 5 was very anti-Semitic and eventually became a Nazi spy. Edit. Spelling. Harold Holt. He forgot my birthday. I forgot his last location. Dwight Eisenhower. One of America's more popular presidents. His domestic policy was okay. But his foreign policy was a disaster whose repercussions continue to resonate today. He organized CIA plots to overthrow democratic governments in Guatemala and Iran, insisting he was protecting these regions from communist incursion when in fact the autocratic regimes installed primarily protected the commercial interests of the United Fruit Company and British Petroleum. He refused to accept the legitimacy of UN brokered elections in Vietnam, nullifying the democratic process and installing a brutal dictator instead, resulting eventually in the U.S. Vietnam War, when the revolution organized by Guevara and Castro overthrew the corrupt Batista regime. Eisenhower gave in to pressure from commercial interests and refused to aid the new government, forcing them to turn to the Soviet Union for help. He then organized the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, which was not launched until after Kennedy was elected, but the planning and organization was pure Eisenhower. The Cuban Missile Crisis resulted directly from Eisenhower's policies. He can also be blamed for nurturing the career of his vice president Richard Nixon, who would become one of the most loathed politicians in U.S. history. This thread reads like the Oatmeal's greatest hits. Lightning McQueen. Mahatma Gandhi. He was anti-black. He displayed sexually aberrant behavior. He slept naked with his teenage nieces for some sort of experiment. AMD a few other things. Now I am not saying that he was outright bad, but he did things that were weird. Go look it up to see for yourself and make your own conclusions. Edit 1. Okay, so I don't know that much. Please read the comments on my post if you want to know more and see more correct information. Edit 2. I get it. He loved his nuclear weapons. Stop telling me. Edit 3 to 1K upvotes? Man, thanks guys. You all rock. U.S. President Andrew Jackson, Trail of Tears. Napoleon. I'm French and I don't get why people like him so freaking much here. He re-established slavery and tried to conquer a huge part of Europe, leaving literal bloodbaths behind him. Gosh. Even the painting of his coronation reeks of narcissism. He's putting the crown on his own head for F***ck sake. Dr. Seuss was a total piece of shit who cheated on his first wife with her friend. His first wife, Helen, had Guillain-Barré syndrome, and knowledge of her husband's affair drove her to eventual suicide. He then remarried her friend. Her suicide note: I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are, that I cannot conceive of life without you. Read her suicide note. My going will leave quite a rumor. But you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Also, this does not make him terrible. But he had an adult nudie book called The 7 Lady Godivas. It's weird, y'all. Most people who are good are just powerless. Most people are complicated. And if they're in a position where they can get away with it, will do both good and bad things. John Lennon. He is basically portrayed as this selfless angel of the hippie movement. But the more you look into his life, his actions and how he treated other people close to him, you will quickly realize he is what some people would call a terrible human being. Basically all of them. You couldn't get way up in politics without being a bad guy in certain way. Anyone born before 1920 was probably a horrible person by today's standards. Charlemagne. He slaughtered a ridiculous amount of Saxon people for not converting to Christianity. He is also known for destroying pagan shrines and groves, when in reality he was just showing up to unguarded holy places, taking all the trinkets and offerings people had left and then burned them down. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.